What started as a routine promotional appearance turned into television chaos when Harrison Ford erupted at Jimmy Kimmel over relentless jokes about his age and career, leading to an explosive confrontation that ended with security escorting. The legendary actor offset. The studio lights dimmed as Jimmy Kimmel's signature theme music filled the Hollywood Boulevard theater. Tonight's guest was supposed to be a ratings goldmine. Harrison Ford, the legendary actor promoting his latest project. The audience buzzed with anticipation, phones already recording in hopes of capturing a viral moment with Han Solo himself. Kimmel strutted onto the stage with his usual smirk, clearly pleased with his booking coup. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a real treat tonight," he announced, his voice dripping with theatrical enthusiasm. "Please welcome the man who's been dodging boulders and flying the Millennium Falcon for longer than some of you have been alive, Harrison Ford." Ford emerged from backstage, his weathered face bearing that familiar expression of reluctant participation that had become his trademark in recent years. The 81-year-old actor moved with the careful gait of someone who'd performed his own stunts. For decades, each step a reminder of countless action sequences that had taken their toll. He waved briefly to the applauding crowd before settling into the guest chair, his posture suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. "Harrison, great too. Have you back," Kimmel began, leaning forward with that predatory smile that his regular viewers knew all too well. "You know, I was thinking, you've been playing action heroes for what, 45 years now? That's longer than most marriages last in Hollywood." The audience chuckled, but Ford's expression remained stoic. "I've been fortunate to work consistently," he replied curtly, clearly hoping to steer the conversation toward his current project. But Kimmel wasn't finished. "Fortunate is one word for it. I mean, at your age, shouldn't you be worried about breaking a hip during those fight scenes? Do they have a stunt double for your stunt double now?" The laughter from the audience felt forced, and Ford's jaw tightened, visibly. "I still do what I can physically handle," he said, his voice carrying a slight edge that anyone familiar with his interviews would recognize as a warning sign. Kimmel pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. "Come on, Harrison, you're 81. When I'm 81, I'll be lucky if I can remember where I put my car keys, let alone swing from helicopters. Don't you think it's time to pass the torch to someone who doesn't need a life alert bracelet on set?" The studio fell uncomfortably quiet. Ford's knuckles whitened as his hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Years of dealing with Hollywood's ageism, countless interviews where his mortality became the punchline, and decades of being reduced to his most famous roles had clearly taken their toll. "That's enough," Ford said quietly, but his voice carried the weight of barely contained fury. Kimmel, either missing the warning or choosing to ignore it, decided to double down. "Oh, come on. Don't get all serious on me. I'm just saying, maybe it's time to hang up the whip and let someone else save the world. You could do Hallmark movies, Indiana Jones and the Lost Remote Control." The audience's nervous laughter died as Ford slowly stood from his chair, his full height imposing despite his years. The man who had embodied some of cinema's most iconic heroes now looked every inch the part of someone who had reached his breaking point. "You think this is funny?" Ford's voice cut through the studio like a blade, each word measured and dangerous. "You sit behind this desk night after night, making jokes about people who've actually done something with their lives, and you think that makes you clever?" Kimmel's cocky demeanor faltered for the first time, his smile wavering as he realized the situation was spiraling beyond his control. But instead of backing down, his ego kicked in, and he made the fatal mistake of trying to regain control through more mockery. "Hey, easy there, Gramps. Don't want you to strain something." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Ford's face transformed from controlled anger to pure rage, his eyes blazing with decades of suppressed frustration. The audience sensed the shift immediately. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was personal. "Gramps?" Ford's voice dropped to a menacing whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the studio. You want to call me Gramps, you little weasel? I was making movies when you were still wetting your bed and dreaming about being relevant. Kimmel's face flushed red, his carefully constructed television persona cracking under the pressure. The show's producers frantically gestured from the wings, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the unfolding disaster. Now wait just a minute, Kimmel shot back, his voice rising defensively. I'm just doing my job here. Comedy is supposed to push boundaries. If you can't handle a few jokes, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Ford stepped closer to the desk, his presence commanding the entire space. Push boundaries? You call making fun of someone's age pushing boundaries? You're nothing but a schoolyard bully with a television show. You hide behind that desk and tear people down because you're too talentless to build anything yourself. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, many still recording on their phones despite the obvious tension. This wasn't the playful banter they'd expected. This was a genuine confrontation between two men who clearly despised each other. Kimmel's producer was now openly signaling for a commercial break, but Kimmel's ego wouldn't let him back down. You know what? You're right. I am just a talk show host, but at least I'm not a has-been actor desperately clinging to roles meant for people half my age. When's the last time you made a movie that wasn't a sequel or a reboot? The insult hit, like a physical blow. Ford's hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment it looked like the 81-year-old actor might actually lunge across the desk. The security guards positioned around the studio tensed, ready to intervene. Has been? Ford's laugh was bitter and cold. I've been entertaining people since before you learned to tie your shoes. I've worked with the greatest directors in cinema history. What have you done? Tell jokes written by a room full of writers who are probably embarrassed to work for you? Kimmel stood up behind his desk, his face now matching Ford's intensity. At least I know when to quit. I'm not out there embarrassing myself, pretending. I can still be an action hero when I need help getting out of a chair. The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row looked genuinely uncomfortable, as if they were witnessing something they shouldn't see. The cameras continued rolling, the operators torn between their professional duty and their human instinct to look away. Ford's voice became deadly calm. You want to know about embarrassment? You're a middle-aged man who makes a living mocking people better than you. Your entire career is built on jealousy and bitterness. At least when I'm gone, people will remember me for something other than being a vindictive little troll. Kimmel's composure finally shattered completely. You arrogant piece of... Finish that sentence, Ford interrupted, his voice carrying the menace of every villain he'd ever faced on screen. Go ahead, Jimmy. Show everyone what you really are when the cameras are rolling and you can't edit yourself. The silence that followed was deafening. Kimmel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, the profanity hanging incomplete in the studio atmosphere. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the edge of his desk, the weight of the moment crushing down on him. I was just... Kimmel stammered, suddenly aware that millions of viewers were witnessing his complete meltdown. But Ford wasn't finished with him. You were just what? Being yourself? Finally showing the world who Jimmy Kimmel really is when he's not hiding behind scripted monologues and softball questions? Ford's voice rose, commanding the attention of every person in the studio. You're a coward, Jimmy. A bully who picks on people because you know they usually can't fight back. The audience began murmuring among themselves, phones still recording every brutal second. In the control room, the director was screaming instructions that nobody seemed to be following. The show had descended into chaos, but the train wreck was too compelling to stop. Kimmel tried to regain control, his voice cracking with desperation. Look, Harrison, maybe we should let's take a break and... No breaks, Ford cut him off sharply. You wanted to humiliate me on national television? You wanted to make jokes about my age, my career, my ability to do my job? Well, congratulations, you got my attention. But now you're going to hear what I really think about you. Ford moved. Around the desk, closing the distance between them. Kimmel instinctively stepped backward, his bravado evaporating as the legendary actor approached. Security guards tensed, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation play out. "You sit here night after night, tearing down people who've actually accomplished something," Ford continued, his voice steady but filled with contempt. "You mock actors, politicians, musicians, anyone who's brave enough to put themselves out there and create something. And why? Because you're jealous. Because deep down, you know you're nothing but a parasite, feeding off other people's talent." Kimmel's face went pale. "That's not... I'm just doing comedy. It's entertainment." "Entertainment?" Ford laughed bitterly. "You call making fun of someone's age entertainment? You think belittling people who've worked harder than you ever will is funny? You're not an entertainer, Jimmy. You're a bottom feeder who's somehow convinced people that cruelty is comedy." The studio audience was completely silent now, witnessing something far more raw and real than any scripted segment. This wasn't the polished, sanitized world of late-night television anymore. This was two men laying bare their deepest resentments. Kimmel's voice became shrill with panic. "You need to calm down, Harrison. You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" Ford's eyes widened with disbelief. "You spent the last 10 minutes calling me old, washed up, and irrelevant, and I'm making a scene? You started this, you pathetic little man. You wanted to humiliate me? Well, let's see how you like it." Ford turned to address the audience directly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded screens for decades. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're seeing the real Jimmy Kimmel tonight, not the carefully crafted persona his writers create for him, but the bitter, jealous man who can't stand the fact that other people have achieved things he never will." The cameras captured every word, every gesture, every moment of Kimmel's visible discomfort. His usual smugness had been replaced by something approaching terror, as he realized the interview had become a public execution of his character. "Security!" Kimmel finally called out, his voice cracking with desperation. "Get him out of here!" Two burly security guards hesitantly approached, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of physically removing one of Hollywood's most respected actors. Ford turned to face them, his expression calm but unyielding. "Don't worry, gentlemen," Ford said with dignified composure, straightening his jacket. "I wouldn't want to stay in this cesspool any longer than necessary." But before he could leave, Ford turned back to Kimmel one final time. The host was cowering behind his desk, sweat beading on his forehead, his carefully styled hair disheveled from running his hands through it nervously. "You know what the difference is between us, Jimmy?" Ford's voice carried across the dead-silent studio. "When people remember you, they'll remember a man who built his career on tearing others down. When they remember me, they'll remember the characters I brought to life, the stories I helped tell, the dreams I helped create. You're a footnote in entertainment history. I'm a chapter." The audience erupted in spontaneous applause, many rising to their feet. The sound was thunderous, drowning out the frantic whispers of the production crew. Even some of the cameramen were nodding in agreement, their respect for Ford evident despite their professional obligations. Kimmel's face flushed crimson with humiliation. "Just get out!" he screamed, his voice breaking like a petulant child's. "Get out of my studio!" Ford smiled coldly. "Your studio? This isn't your studio, Jimmy. This is just another stage where you perform your pathetic act. The real Jimmy Kimmel, the bitter, insecure, talentless man we've all seen tonight. That's who you really are when the mask comes off." As Ford walked toward the exit, he paused at the edge of the stage and addressed the audience one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've been wonderful. I'm sorry you had to witness this display of unprofessionalism, but sometimes the truth needs to be spoken. Thank you for your support over the years." The applause intensified, with several audience members calling out supportive comments. "We love you, Harrison," one woman shouted. "You're a legend," called another. Behind his desk, Kimmel was frantically signaling for the cameras to stop rolling, but the damage was already done. His reputation was crumbling in real time, broadcast to millions of viewers who were witnessing the complete breakdown of his carefully constructed persona. Ford exited through the backstage area with the dignity of a man who had nothing left to prove. The security guards followed at a respectful distance, more like an honor guard than enforcers. As he disappeared from view, the studio erupted in chaos. Kimmel stood behind his desk, his show in ruins, his credibility destroyed. The audience continued applauding Ford's exit while muttering among themselves about what they'd just witnessed. Social media was already exploding with clips of the confrontation, hashtags trending worldwide within minutes. The director finally managed to cut to commercial, but it was too late. The raw footage was already being shared across every platform imaginable. Ford's dignified dismantling of Kimmel's character had been broadcast live to the world, and there was no taking it back. In the aftermath, as the studio slowly emptied and the dust settled, Kimmel was left alone at his desk, staring at the chaos he had created. His attempt to mock a Hollywood legend had backfired spectacularly, revealing him to be exactly what Ford had accused him of being, a small, bitter man who built his career on the misfortune of others. The incident marked a turning point in late-night television. Ford's powerful words about respect and professionalism resonated across the industry, sparking conversations about the responsibility that comes with having a platform. Within days, Kimmel's ratings had plummeted. Advertisers were pulling out, and his own network was questioning his future. Harrison Ford, meanwhile, had reminded the world why he remained one of Hollywood's most respected figures. His refusal to be bullied, his articulate defense of dignity in entertainment, and his graceful exit had turned what should have been a career-damaging moment into a triumph of character over cruelty. The confrontation would be remembered not as Ford's downfall, but as the night he stood up to a bully and won.